Commander Tak stood on the bridge of the Horizon Asterisk, his 7-foot frame casting a long shadow across the control room. The ship hung in orbit around the blue-green planet below. The third planet from an ordinary yellow star had caught the Galactic Federation's attention only because it showed signs of developing technology. "Magnify Sector 4, Tak ordered, his mandibles clicking softly as he spoke. The view screen zoomed in on a sprawling city near an ocean. Tak watched the tiny vehicles moving along organized pathways, the structures reaching modestly toward the sky. Nothing impressive by Federation standards. "Another unremarkable world," he said, thin gray fingers tapping on the control panel. "Run the biological assessment." Science Officer June floated across the bridge on her gravity disks. Unlike Tak's insectoid appearance, June's species resembled something between a jellyfish and a humanoid, with translucent skin that rippled with bioluminescent patterns when she was thinking deeply, as she was now. "The dominant species is quite fragile, Commander," she reported, her voice melodic. "No natural armor or defenses. No claws, minimal strength compared to Federation standards, poor sensory capabilities." She gestured to the screen with a flowing motion. "They require artificial protection from their own environment. Many of their dwellings are simply to shelter them from ordinary weather conditions." Tak made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Imagine needing protection from rain." "They compensate with crude technology," Jum continued, her skin flickering with blue lights as data streamed into her neural implants. "Combustion engines, primitive digital systems, rudimentary medicine. They still die from simple bacterial infections." "Have they achieved space travel?" Tak asked. "Only in the most basic sense. They've sent a few of their kind to their own moon. Some simple probes to nearby planets. Nothing beyond their own system." Tak walked to the window and looked down at the planet with his 4 eyes. "Resource scan." Officer Da, a stocky reptilian with bronze scales, looked up from his station. "Impressive, Commander. The planet has abundant water, minerals, and biological diversity. The atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen rich. Several rare elements present in accessible concentrations. Any threats we should be aware of?" Tak asked. "Their weapons are primarily kinetic or chemical-based. Nuclear capability exists but is limited," Day reported. "Nothing that could damage a Federation vessel." Tak nodded. This was routine. The Federation had incorporated hundreds of worlds like this one. "Classify them as Class C," he ordered. "Prepare first contact procedures. The Federation always needs new resource worlds." "Should we notify Central Command?" asked June. "Not necessary," Tak said, returning to his command chair. "Standard protocol is sufficient. We'll make contact, establish dominance, and begin integration. They'll be grateful for our technology and protection. They always are." On Earth, Dr. Hannah Lee rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the readouts on her computer screen. The observatory had been picking up unusual signals for the past week, patterns that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. "The signals are repeating in 5-minute intervals," she told Colonel Jai, who stood beside her desk with military rigidity. "They're focused on our major cities, power grids, and military installations." Colonel Jay's face remained impassive, but his hand tightened slightly on the back of her chair. "You're certain these aren't coming from any Earth-based source? Not Chinese? Not Russian?" Hannah shook her head. "The signals are coming from approximately 300,000 kilometers away. In orbit." She pulled up another screen showing the trajectory. "Whatever is sending them is moving in a controlled pattern around Earth. These signals aren't random, Colonel. Something's watching us." Colonel Jay was silent for a moment. At 50, he had spent 30 years in military intelligence. He had seen enough to know when to worry. "How many people know about this?" "Just my team. 5 people total." "Keep it that way," he said. "I need to make some calls." Before he reached the door, Hannah called after him. "Colonel, there's something else. The signals changed yesterday. They're stronger. Whatever is up there." I think it's made a decision. 3 days later, global news networks interrupted regular broadcasts with breaking news. Reports came in from around the world of an unidentified object descending through Earth's atmosphere, hanging over the United Nations headquarters in New York. The object was smooth and silver, about the size of a small office building, and perfectly silent. It hovered 100 meters above the building, defying all known physics. Military jets approached but kept their distance. The world watched and waited. Inside the UN General Assembly, representatives from 193 nations sat in stunned silence as Secretary General Park addressed them. "We are facing an unprecedented moment in human history," Park said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "We must show unity and caution. All nations have agreed to a temporary halt of military actions while we establish communication." Dr. Hannah Lee sat in the back of the room with Colonel Jha. She had been flown to New York on a military jet after her discovery had been verified. "What do you think they want?" she whispered. "Nothing good comes from this kind of entrance," Colonel Jay replied quietly. "They're making a show of power." The lights in the assembly hall dimmed suddenly. A murmur of alarm spread through the crowd. Then, in the center of the chamber, the air seemed to bend and twist. 3 figures materialized. The one in the center stood over 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and an insectoid face. To its left was a floating, translucent being with rippling skin. To its right stood a bronze-scaled creature with a thick tail. "People of Earth," the tall being said, its voice oddly accented but understandable. "I am Commander Tak of the Galactic Federation. We have come to welcome you into our collective of worlds." The assembly erupted in a mixture of wonder, fear, and excitement. Secretary General Park called for order. "We are honored by your visit," Park said carefully. "This is a historic moment for humanity." Commander Tak's mandibles clicked. "Yes, historic for your kind. For us, it is routine. We have incorporated many developing worlds like yours into our Federation. You will benefit greatly from our guidance." Something in his tone made Hannah uneasy. She glanced at Colonel Jai, who was watching the aliens with narrowed eyes. "What exactly does incorporation entail?" Park asked. "Protection. Technology. Advancement," Tak said. "In exchange for reasonable access to your planet's resources. A fair arrangement that has benefited many species." "Resources?" Park asked. "Your water alone will supply 3 Federation worlds." The floating alien, Science Officer Jun, added casually. "Your minerals will fuel our expansion in this sector." The room grew quiet. "And if we choose not to join your Federation?" asked the representative from Nigeria. Tak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "That option is not recommended, but we understand you will need time to process this opportunity. We will return in 3 of your days for your answer." The aliens vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. The room exploded into chaos. Colonel Jay grabbed Hannah's arm. "Come with me," he said urgently. As they pushed through the crowd, Hannah asked, "What are we going to do?" "They clearly see us as nothing but a resource." "They've made a critical error," Colonel Jay said grimly. "They've underestimated us because we don't have claws or armor or whatever they consider strength." He pulled her down a hallway where other military personnel were gathering. "They think we're weak, but they've never met humans before." Hannah looked at the determined faces around her. For the first time since the alien ship appeared, she felt a spark of hope. "They see us as little more than clever animals on a planet ripe for harvesting," she said. "We need to show them just how wrong they are." 3 days after first contact, the alien ship returned as promised. This time, a sleek shuttle descended to land directly on the UN Plaza. A delegation of 5 Federation representatives emerged and were escorted into the General Assembly Hall, which was packed with world leaders and diplomats. Diplomat Vril led the delegation. Unlike Commander Tak's insectoid appearance, Vril belonged to a species that resembled tall, slender humanoids with iridescent scaled skin. His large, lidless eyes scanned the room with what appeared to be mild curiosity. Secretary General Park opened the session with a formal greeting, then yielded the floor to Vril, who stepped to the podium. People of Earth, Vril began, his mouth not matching his words as his translator converted his native speech into human languages. The Federation welcomes you. For 50,000 years, we have brought peace and advancement to hundreds of worlds. Today marks the beginning of Earth's ascension. President Kim of South Korea, selected to speak for the coalition of Earth nations, rose from her seat. She was small in stature but regarded as one of the planet's sharpest diplomatic minds. "We appreciate the Federation's interest in Earth," she said carefully. "However, we have many questions before any agreements can be discussed." Vril's scales shifted color slightly, showing what might have been impatience. "Of course, questions are expected from developing species." President Kim maintained her composure despite the condescension. "Your species will benefit greatly from Federation management," Diplomat Vril continued, his translator rendering his chittering speech into dozens of human languages simultaneously. "Our guidance has elevated many primitive worlds." "And what exactly does management entail?" President Kim asked, leaning forward. "Resource allocation, population controls, standard procedures," Vril replied casually, waving a four-fingered hand dismissively. "Your water reserves alone will supply 3 Federation worlds." The room erupted in outrage. Representatives stood, shouting questions and objections. Security personnel moved closer to the podium. Secretary General Park pounded his gavel, calling for order. "Please, please, we must maintain decorum." When the room quieted, President Kim spoke again, her voice ice-cold. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding, Diplomat Vril. Earth is not offering its resources for harvesting. We were hoping for an exchange of knowledge and peaceful relations." Vril's scales flushed a deep purple. "I fear it is you who misunderstands, President Kim. The Federation does not request. We inform. Your technology level qualifies Earth as a Class C world. Under Federation protocol, Class C worlds receive management, not partnership." The Federation delegation behind Vril shifted, one of them touching something on its wrist. Suddenly, a holographic image appeared above the assembly, a map of Earth with regions highlighted in different colors. "These designated zones will be established within your lunar cycle," Vril continued. "Zone 1 will be our primary extraction site." The map zoomed in on the central Pacific Ocean. "We will begin with a demonstration of our harvesting technology. This area contains abundant water and mineral resources with minimal population displacement required." President Kim stood again. "This is unacceptable. Earth rejects these terms." Vril's translator seemed to struggle with his response, emitting a series of clicks before settling on words. "Rejection is not an option available to Class C worlds." He turned to his delegation. "We will proceed with the demonstration tomorrow. It will help your leaders understand the situation more clearly." The Federation representatives departed without further discussion, leaving the assembly in chaos. The next morning, 3 Federation ships positioned themselves over the Central Pacific. Military vessels from the United States, Japan, China, and Australia converged in the area, but maintained distance as ordered. Colonel J stood on the bridge of the South Korean destroyer Sejong the Great, watching the alien ships through binoculars. "What do we know about their capabilities?" he asked the intelligence officer beside him. "Very little, sir," the young officer replied. "Satellite imagery shows they've deployed some kind of large device into the ocean. It's approximately 300 meters below the surface." Colonel J's secure phone rang. It was Dr. Hannah Lee. "Colonel, I've been analyzing the data from their first appearance," she said urgently. "Their technology relies heavily on electromagnetic principles we already understand. Their advantage is in application, not fundamental physics." "What does that mean in practical terms, Doctor?" Jai asked. "It means..." A sudden alarm blared through the ship, interrupting her. The ocean beneath the Federation ships had begun to glow an eerie blue. A massive column of water rose into the air, defying gravity, flowing upward into the belly of the largest alien vessel. "They're extracting seawater," the intelligence officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Sensors indicate they're separating minerals and other elements during the process." Colonel J made a quick decision. "Alert all Allied vessels. Weapons ready but hold fire until ordered." He returned to his call. "Dr. Lee, we need options. Now." "The electromagnetic signatures from their ships suggest vulnerabilities to certain frequencies," she replied. "If we could generate a strong enough pulse." Suddenly, the water column collapsed. One of the Federation ships tilted oddly, its lights flickering. "Sir," the radar operator called out, "the Chinese destroyer HFY has fired something at the alien vessel." Colonel J watched as the damaged Federation ship regained stability, then turned toward the Chinese vessel. A beam of light shot from the alien craft, slicing through the water toward the HFY. But the Chinese ship had already moved, evading the attack with surprising speed. More Earth vessels began maneuvering, displaying coordination that clearly caught the Federation ships off guard. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Allied Fleet Command," the communications officer reported. "They've used modified EMP devices against the alien ship." It was partially effective. Within minutes, the confrontation escalated. Federation ships fired energy weapons while Earth vessels responded with missiles and electromagnetic countermeasures. The human ships moved in coordinated patterns, never staying still long enough to present an easy target. After 30 minutes of unexpectedly fierce resistance, the Federation ships withdrew to higher orbit. Commander Tak paced the bridge of the horizon, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "Impossible," Tak hissed as reports came in. "These primitives have already modified their weapons based on our technology. How could they adapt so quickly?" Science Officer Jun's skin rippled with concerned patterns. "The EMP weapons they deployed were crude but effective against our shield generators. They should not have been able to identify that weakness so rapidly." "Their vessels moved with unexpected coordination," added Officer Da. "They avoided our targeting systems by constantly changing course." Tak slammed a fist against the control panel. "They're just primitives." Their technological assessment confirmed it. "Commander," Jun said hesitantly, "I believe we may have underestimated their adaptive capabilities. Their weapons were basic, yes, but their tactical responses were sophisticated." Tak turned to the communications officer. "Contact Diplomat Frill. We need to adjust our approach." In an underground facility beneath Seoul, Dr. Hannah Lee bent over a damaged piece of Federation technology that had been recovered from the ocean after the confrontation. The device, part of the water extraction system, had been disabled by the Chinese EMP weapon. Colonel J stood across from her, watching as she carefully disassembled the alien components. "This is fascinating," she murmured, examining a crystal-like structure at the core of the device. "Their systems are actually quite simple once you understand the principles. They use crystalline matrices to channel energy, but the underlying physics follows rules we already know." "Can we replicate it?" Colonel J asked. "Not completely, not yet, but we can definitely disrupt it." She looked up at him, excitement in her eyes despite the dire situation. "They never expected us to fight back effectively. Their technology is advanced, yes, but they've grown complacent. They don't innovate anymore. They just apply the same solutions across all worlds." Colonel J nodded slowly. "And humans, if nothing else, are very good at finding new ways to fight." Hannah's phone buzzed with an alert. She checked it, and her expression hardened. "The Federation has requested another meeting at the UN. They're offering revised terms." "They're adjusting their approach," Colonel J said grimly. "But they still don't understand what they're dealing with." "No," Hannah agreed, looking back at the alien device. "They've made a fundamental mistake in their assessment of humanity. They saw our technological limitations and assumed we were weak." "Their mistake," Colonel J said, "was thinking that technology alone defines strength." As they left the lab, news reports showed Federation ships repositioning around Earth. The first battle had been fought, but the real war was just beginning. 1 month after first contact, Earth was at war. The Federation had established bases in remote areas: the Sahara Desert, Siberia, the Australian outback, and the Antarctic Peninsula. From these locations, they deployed harvesters to extract resources and launched attacks against major military installations. What had started as a simple pacification mission for the Federation was now a grinding conflict they were completely unprepared for. They had expected Earth to surrender quickly after seeing their advanced technology. Instead, humans fought back with unexpected ferocity. Commander Tak stood in the Federation's main base in the Sahara, watching the holographic battle map with growing frustration. Red indicators showed yet another failed operation. "Explain this," he demanded of his tactical officer. "Our forces were ambushed while attempting to secure the water processing facility," the officer reported. "Human forces used the sandstorm as cover. They have adapted their vision systems to function in conditions that blind our sensors." The sandstorm was at 55 degrees Celsius with wind speeds exceeding safe parameters, Science Officer June added, her translucent form rippling with stress patterns. Human soldiers operated in these conditions for over 27 hours without rest. Tak slammed his fist on the table. "How? Their bodies are so fragile." "Unknown, Commander. Our understanding of human physiology appears to be incomplete." Similar reports came in from all Federation bases. In Siberia, human soldiers raided a Federation outpost during a blizzard, moving through temperatures of -40 degrees. In the Australian outback, humans attacked during the hottest part of the day when Federation troops had to shelter in their climate-controlled facilities. A Federation commander from the Antarctic base sent an urgent message. "They keep coming," he reported, mandibles trembling visibly even in the holographic projection. "We neutralized their forces, and they adapt within days. They captured one of our thermal regulators last week. Today they attacked wearing crude copies that allowed them to function in extreme cold." Tak turned off the projection. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," he said quietly. "June, I want a complete reassessment of human capabilities." Dr. Hannah Lee worked in a converted bunker beneath the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Around her, a team of scientists from 20 countries analyzed captured Federation technology and biological samples. Colonel Jia entered the lab, looking exhausted but determined. "Please tell me you have good news," he said. Hannah smiled for the first time in days. "I do. We've made a breakthrough in understanding their physiology." She led him to a sealed chamber containing tissue samples from a Federation soldier who had died in battle. "Look at these cellular structures," she said, pointing to a microscope display. All 3 main Federation species showed the same pattern. Their cells are highly specialized, extremely efficient in controlled conditions, but they lack the adaptability of human cells. "What does that mean in practical terms?" Colonel J asked. "It means they evolved on worlds with stable conditions," she explained excitedly. "Limited temperature variations, few pathogens, consistent gravity. When conditions change suddenly, their bodies can't compensate the way ours can." Jia looked at her, beginning to understand. "So Earth would be classified as a death trap by their standards," Hannah finished. "Think about it. We have temperature variations of over 100 degrees Celsius from coldest to hottest regions. We have thousands of pathogens our bodies fight off daily. Our gravity is higher than their homeworlds. Our atmospheric pressure variations would cause their biological systems to fail." She pulled up comparison charts on her tablet. Human beings evolved to survive on one of the most challenging planets in the galaxy, and they never accounted for that. Their assessment classified our technology as primitive, but they failed to understand what it means that we developed that technology in such harsh conditions. Colonel J straightened his shoulders. "This is exactly what we need. How quickly can you develop practical applications?" "We already have," Hannah replied, leading him to another section of the lab. "These are environmental manipulators based on their own technology. We've modified them to create rapid shifts in temperature, humidity, pressure, and atmospheric composition. Environments that we can adapt to, but they can't. Jay nodded approvingly. Exactly. And there's more. She showed him weapons designed to disrupt the Federation's environmental control systems. Their soldiers need those suits to function on Earth. Make those suits fail, and they're fighting in what is essentially toxic conditions for them. Colonel Jay's phone buzzed with a message. The Emergency Council is meeting in an hour. You need to present these findings. The Emergency Council consisted of 12 representatives from the world's major powers. They gathered in a secure underground facility in Geneva, connected to military commanders around the globe via encrypted communications. Dr. Hana presented her findings to stunned silence. When she finished, the Council immediately authorized deployment of the new countermeasures. Within days, the tide of the war began to shift. Human forces attacked Federation bases with new tactics and technologies designed to exploit the aliens' biological limitations. In Australia, special forces used modified Federation technology to create sudden pressure changes that disoriented alien troops while humans, wearing simple protective gear, moved in. In Antarctica, environmental manipulators created temperature fluctuations that made Federation environmental suits malfunction. The most dramatic victory came in the Sahara. Colonel Jay personally led an operation that captured the Federation's main base. His forces deployed devices that created a microbial cloud harmless to humans, but devastating to Federation biology. The alien soldiers found their protective systems overwhelmed, as their filters couldn't handle the sudden biological attack, something they had never needed to design for on their sterile homeworlds. Commander Tak was captured in the Sahara offensive. Colonel Jay entered the command center to find the alien leader struggling to breathe as his environmental suit failed. Impossible, Tak gasped, his mandibles clicking weakly. You're just primitives. No, Colonel Jay replied calmly. We're humans. We evolved on a world that would kill your kind in minutes without protection. Every day of our lives, we fight off thousands of microscopic invaders. We survive temperature changes that would shut down your biological systems. We endure gravity that would crush your bones. He knelt beside the fallen commander. Your mistake wasn't underestimating our technology. It was underestimating the creatures who could develop technology on a world like Earth. 2 months after the war began, Federation forces retreated from Earth. Colonel Jay's United Earth Defense Forces had reclaimed territory week by week, using Federation technology against them in ways its creators never imagined. At the Emergency Council meeting celebrating the victory, Dr. Hana was honored for her contributions, but she warned the Council that the war might not be over. The Federation spans hundreds of worlds, she reminded them. They will return with greater forces unless we can find a way to make peace from a position of strength. Colonel Jay nodded in agreement, which is why we need to take the fight to them. The room fell silent as he unveiled the next phase of Earth's defense. A fleet of ships built using captured and reverse-engineered Federation technology. We've learned to combine their science with human ingenuity, he explained. Their ships are more advanced, but they're designed for efficiency, not combat. Ours are built by people who have been fighting wars for our entire history. Dr. Hana looked at the ship designs with a mixture of pride and concern. The Federation never imagined that in just a few months, we would go from defending our planet to preparing to take the battle to their territory. That's because they never understood who they were dealing with, Colonel Jay replied. They saw us as primitives, because we didn't have their technology. They never considered what it means that we survived on Earth long enough to develop any technology at all. As the first human ships prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the Federation was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating the species from the death world called Earth. The Federation capital world of Luminara shimmered under its 3 moons. Tall crystal spires and floating platforms housed the governing bodies that controlled hundreds of worlds across 3 star systems. For 10,000 years, the Federation had expanded without serious challenge, until now. Emergency alarms echoed through the Grand Hall as council members hurried to their seats. High Administrator Nell, a tall, slender being with 6 arms and silvery skin, called the session to order. "This council is convened to address the Earth situation," Nell announced, voice amplified throughout the chamber. "Our forces have been driven from the planet with significant losses. Commander Tak has been captured. 3 harvester ships destroyed. This is unprecedented." The council members murmured anxiously. Most belonged to species that had evolved in carefully balanced environments. Worlds with minimal temperature variations, few natural predators, and stable conditions. The concept of failure against a primitive species disturbed them deeply. "Science Division will report first," Nell ordered. Senior Scientist Vex stepped forward, mandibles clicking nervously. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond our initial assessment. They adapted our technology with remarkable speed. They function in environmental conditions that would kill most Federation species. They continue fighting despite injuries that should be incapacitating." Vex displayed holographic battle footage showing human soldiers operating in scorching deserts, freezing mountains, and during violent storms, all conditions that required Federation troops to wear protective suits. "How is this possible?" asked a council member. "Their biology appeared simple, fragile. Our assessment was incomplete," Vex admitted. "We failed to account for the evolutionary pressures of their home world." High Administrator Nell's expression darkened. "Explain." Before Vex could answer, a small ancient figure shuffled forward from the back of the chamber. The council members fell silent in respect. Elder Scientist Mech was among the oldest living beings in the Federation, his exoskeleton worn and faded with age. His species was known for their long lives and perfect memory. Mech rarely attended council sessions anymore, making his presence now particularly significant. "I requested to address this council," Mech said, his voice thin but clear, antennae quivering with age. "When I learned of this world called Earth, something stirred in my memory. I have consulted the ancient archives, records from before the Federation's founding." He raised a gnarled limb, activating a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Ancient symbols flowed through the air, eventually forming an image of a blue-green planet. "Earth matches the description of what our ancestors called crucible worlds, planets with conditions so harsh they forge exceptionally dangerous life forms," Mech announced gravely. The holographic display shifted, showing scenes that made council members gasp. Massive waves crashing over coastlines, mountains spewing molten rock, swirling storm systems covering entire continents, creatures devouring one another in brutal food chains. "This is Earth?" someone asked. "Indeed," Mech confirmed. "Earth experiences temperature variations that would kill most Federation species without protective equipment. Its gravity is higher than 82% of inhabited worlds. Its atmosphere contains compounds toxic to many species. Its oceans can generate waves taller than this chamber." The display shifted again, showing microscopic organisms. Human baseline functioning requires surviving a planet with thousands of pathogens, extreme weather, natural disasters, and predators that would exterminate most sentient species within generations. Mech continued. "They aren't just another civilization. They're survival specialists." The council chamber remained silent as Mech's words sank in. "Our ancestors knew of such worlds," Mech said. "They wisely chose to avoid them. The protocols for crucible worlds were clear. Observe from a distance, but never engage directly. These protocols were apparently lost over generations, as we encountered fewer challenging worlds." High Administrator Nell leaned forward. "Elder Mech, what are you suggesting?" "I am not suggesting, Administrator. I am stating fact. We have awakened a species forged in conditions most of us would consider unsurvivable. A species that has fought its environment, its fellow creatures, and itself since its evolution. A species that views struggle not as an aberration, but as its natural state." The silence in the chamber grew heavier. "We must reconsider our approach," Mech concluded. "Traditional pacification will not work. Earth is not like other worlds we have encountered." As if to punctuate his words, an alarm blared through the chamber. A Federation military commander rushed in, his scales pale with distress. "Administrator, we have detected unidentified vessels approaching Luminara. They appear to be using modified Federation drive systems." High Administrator Nell rose from his seat. "Impossible. Earth doesn't have interstellar capability. The vessels are of unknown design, but they are definitely powered by Federation technology," the commander insisted. "They will reach our orbit in 6 hours." The council exploded into panicked discussion. Meanwhile, aboard the Earth vessel Resilience, Colonel J stood on the bridge, watching as the Federation capital world grew larger in the view screen. The Earth fleet consisted of only 5 ships, small by Federation standards, but carrying the best of human military technology combined with adapted alien systems. "Fleet status," he asked his communications officer. "All ships report ready, Colonel. Weapons and shields at full capacity." Dr. Hannah Lee entered the bridge, looking tired but excited. For 3 months, she had led the research team that reversed-engineered Federation technology and developed new communication systems. "The translator protocols are ready," she reported. "We should be able to communicate directly with any Federation species without relying on their systems." Colonel J nodded appreciatively. "Good work. We'll need it if we're going to convince them to negotiate rather than continue this war." When Earth's forces had driven the Federation from their planet, the Emergency Council had faced a critical decision: remain on Earth and prepare for the Federation's inevitable return with larger forces, or take a bold step to bring the fight to the enemy's doorstep. They had chosen the latter, committing their limited resources to building a small but powerful fleet. "Do you think they'll listen?" Hannah asked quietly. "They'll listen," Jay replied with certainty. "Because we're giving them no choice. Either they negotiate with us as equals, or they learn exactly how dangerous humans can be when cornered." The tactical officer called out from his station. "Colonel, we're picking up defensive systems activating around the planet. They've detected us." "As expected," Jay said calmly. "Open a channel using Dr. Lee's protocols. Let's introduce ourselves properly." Back in the Federation Council chamber, panic had given way to grim determination. Military commanders presented defense options while council members debated whether to evacuate the capital. "They can't possibly have weapons capable of threatening Luminara," one council member insisted. "They've had our technology for mere months." Elder Mech shook his head sadly. "You still don't understand what we face. Humans have been adapting weapons since before they developed written language. War is woven into their history in a way most Federation species cannot comprehend." A communications officer interrupted. "Administrator, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Earth vessel. They're using our own communication protocols, but modified." Nell hesitated, then nodded. "Let us hear them." A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber, a human male in a military uniform, standing straight-backed and confident. "I am Colonel J of Earth," he announced. "We come representing the United Nations of our world. This is High Administrator Nell of the Galactic Federation. Your presence here is a violation of Federation law. Return to your system immediately or face destruction." Colonel J's expression remained impassive. "Administrator, we both know that's not going to happen. Your forces attacked our world. We defended ourselves. Now we need to discuss how to move forward without further bloodshed." "You have no standing to make demands," Nell replied coldly. "We're not making demands," said a female human, stepping into view beside Colonel J. "We're offering an opportunity. I'm Dr. Hannah Lee, Chief Scientific Advisor to Earth's Emergency Council. We've analyzed your Federation structure. We know you control many worlds, some willingly part of your coalition, others subjugated as we were meant to be." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "We also know that 17 of your member species have requested independence in the past century and been denied. 3 attempted rebellions were brutally suppressed." Council members exchanged alarmed glances. This was classified information. How did one begin? "Your data security is impressive," Dr. Lee continued, but not designed to withstand human hackers. We think differently than you do. We find paths you don't see. Colonel J spoke again. We have a simple proposition. Recognize Earth as an independent, sovereign planet. Establish diplomatic relations as equals. End your policy of forced resource extraction. In return, we'll share our unique approach to adaptation and technology. And if we refuse? Nell asked. Then we demonstrate exactly why crucible worlds were meant to be avoided, Colonel J replied simply. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Elder Mech's ancient voice cut through the quiet. They know about crucible worlds. They've accessed our deepest archives. He turned to the administrator. They're giving us a choice between wisdom and pain. I suggest we choose wisely. The Federation capital was in chaos. For the first time in living memory, enemy ships orbited their world. Though Earth's fleet was small, just 5 vessels, the fact that they had reached the capital at all had shattered the Federation's sense of security. High Administrator Nell called an emergency vote of the full council, all 57 representatives of the major Federation worlds. The session stretched through the night as they debated their options. We should strike now with everything we have, argued the military representative, a hulking creature with armored plates covering its body. Their fleet is tiny, and risk further escalation, countered another council member. Their ships have already demonstrated shield technology that repelled our initial scans. They've modified our own weapons systems in ways our engineers don't yet understand. Elder Scientist Mech, who rarely spoke at length due to his advanced age, addressed the council again. In the ancient archives, there is an account of another crucible world species encountered long ago. Our ancestors chose to fight rather than negotiate. His voice grew heavy with significance. That species is no longer in the archives because our ancestors were nearly destroyed. It took 1,000 years to recover. The council chamber fell silent. Bring the humans to the chamber, Nell finally ordered. Let us hear their terms directly. Colonel J and Dr. Hannah Lee stood on the surface of the Federation capital world, the first humans to set foot on a planet beyond their solar system. They were escorted by an honor guard. Though whether for their protection or to guard against them, neither was sure. The architecture was breathtaking. Crystal spires that seemed to defy gravity, floating platforms connected by bridges of light, beings of dozens of species moving in harmony. Despite the circumstances, Hannah couldn't help but marvel at the scene. It's beautiful, she whispered to Jai. And built on exploitation, he replied quietly. Remember why we're here. The Grand Council chamber was vast, with concentric rings of seats rising high above a central speaking floor. All 57 council members were present, along with military commanders and advisors. The mood was tense but controlled. Commander Tak was there, having been returned as a gesture of good faith. He stood rigidly near Administrator Nell, his compound eyes fixed on the humans who had defeated him. High Administrator Nell opened the session formally. Colonel Jai and Dr. Lee of Earth, you stand before the full Galactic Federation Council. Your presence here is unprecedented. You have requested this audience to present terms. The Council will hear you. Colonel Jai stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. Thank you, Administrator. We come representing the United Nations of Earth. 3 months ago, your forces arrived at our world with the intention of harvesting our resources and subjugating our people. You classified us as primitive based on our technology level. You assumed we would submit or be easily conquered. He paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber. Instead, we drove your forces from our planet and now stand in your capital. We could have come with weapons charged, seeking revenge, but that is not our purpose. Dr. Hannah moved to stand beside him. We don't want war, she explained in the Grand Chamber. We want recognition, partnership, and protection for worlds that have been exploited. You speak of exploitation, Nell responded coldly, yet you threaten us with your presence. We demonstrated our capability because it was necessary, Hannah replied. Your Federation understands power. Now that we have your attention, we can speak as equals." She activated a small device, projecting images into the air. Federation mining operations on devastated worlds, species living in poor conditions while their planet's resources were shipped away. "These are from your own records," she explained. 17 worlds currently classified as resource planets. Their populations have no voice in this chamber. Their environments are being destroyed. This system is unsustainable and unjust. Murmurs spread through the council. Many members looked uncomfortable. "What exactly do you propose?" Nell asked, their tone less dismissive than before. Colonel Jay stepped forward again. "We propose the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, a new framework where all worlds have representation, where technology and resources are shared rather than extracted, where the strong help the weak instead of exploiting them." He continued, outlining a detailed plan for restructuring the Federation's relationship with its member worlds. As he spoke, many council members leaned forward, listening intently. "How would Earth benefit from this arrangement?" asked a council member from the upper tiers. "Earth brings unique perspectives," Hannah explained. "Our species evolved solving problems in ways yours never needed to. We see patterns you miss. We adapt technologies in ways you haven't considered. In exchange for our insights, we gain access to the stars." She gestured to Commander Tak. "Ask him what humans accomplished in 3 months with captured Federation technology. Then imagine what we could achieve as partners over years or decades." Tak's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. They improvise in ways that defy logic. They combine technologies that should not work together. They function despite pain, exhaustion, and impossible conditions. "Your assessment of humans was accurate in one sense," Hannah told the council. "Our technology is less advanced than yours. But your mistake was thinking that technology defines a species' capability. Earth has something the Federation has forgotten: the drive to overcome, to survive against all odds." A small-scaled council member spoke up. "What guarantees do we have that humans won't simply replace us as the dominant power? That you won't become the new oppressors?" Colonel Jay nodded, acknowledging the concern. "A fair question. The Cooperation Initiative includes checks and balances specifically designed to prevent any single species from controlling others, including humans." He paused, looking around the chamber. "We've studied your history. The Federation began with noble goals, sharing knowledge, elevating all member species. Over millennia, it became something else, a hierarchy where some benefit at the expense of others. We're offering a chance to return to those original ideals." The debate continued for hours. Some council members firmly opposed any change to the Federation structure. Others, particularly those from worlds that had long felt marginalized, spoke in favor of the human proposal. Throughout it all, Elder Mech watched silently, his ancient eyes evaluating the humans with newfound respect. Eventually, High Administrator Nell called for a recess. "The council will deliberate privately. You will be summoned when we reach a decision." 3 days later, Colonel Jay and Dr. Hannah stood again in the council chamber. The mood was different, less hostile, more contemplative. After careful consideration, Nell announced, "The Federation Council has voted to accept the framework of the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, with modifications to be negotiated." Their voice carried a hint of resignation, but also relief. The Federation has existed for 10,000 years by adapting to new challenges. Perhaps this is simply another adaptation. Reports had reached the Council of growing unrest on several Federation worlds. News of Earth's resistance had spread, inspiring others. The humans' arrival had merely accelerated a process that was already beginning. 10 years later, the Galactic Academy on Luminara welcomed students from across known space. Among the most prestigious courses was Interspecies Relations and History, taught by Professor Jun, one of the first humans to take up permanent residence in what was now called the Galactic Cooperation. Her classroom contained beings from dozens of worlds, all eager to learn from the species that had transformed galactic society in less than a decade. Today we discuss the Earth phenomenon. Professor Jun announced to her wide-eyed students, "Can anyone tell me why Earth's resistance to Federation integration was significant?" A tentacled student raised an appendage. "Because they defeated technologically superior forces." "Partly," Jun acknowledged. "But many species have mounted temporary resistance. What made Earth different was our understanding of what the Federation had become, and our vision for what it could be again." She activated the room's holographic system, displaying a rotating image of Earth, blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown landmasses. The humans' greatest strength wasn't their technology or even their adaptability, Professor Jun told her students. It was that on Earth, nothing comes easy. They had to fight for every advancement, survive countless threats, and overcome impossible odds just to exist. When we threatened them, we merely presented one more challenge to overcome. The image zoomed in, showing Earth's diverse environments, from scorching deserts to frozen poles, from violent oceans to towering mountains. To most Federation species, Earth is a death world. Too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, too unpredictable. But to humans, it's home. It forged us into problem solvers, into survivors. She smiled at her diverse classroom, representing a new era of cooperation rather than domination. Remember this lesson. Never underestimate a species that calls a death world home. But also remember that such species can be your greatest allies. The same drive that makes them formidable opponents makes them invaluable friends. In orbit above, Earth's newest ambassador vessel prepared to depart for a formerly exploited world, carrying environmental engineers and medical specialists to help restore what centuries of Federation harvesting had damaged. On its hull, beneath the United Earth emblem, was the ship's name in multiple languages, *Cooperation*, and below that, a simple motto that had become famous throughout the galaxy. From Earth, here to help.